Allie, co-founder of Potomac Beads, and I'm going to show you today how to bezel a 13 by 18 millimeter rectangle crystal in its most simplistic form, using some 11/0 seed beads in a right angle weave method to start out and then finishing off with peyote. Gather up your materials and join me in making this nice, simple bezel. So we want to keep our rectangle shape, and to do that we basically need to make the bezel into a rectangle. I don't want to look at this and think it looks like an oval. I want to make sure that it still looks like a rectangle. So to make it look like a rectangle, instead of starting out with the peyote stitch for the bezel and doing with delicas, I had the request for 11/0 seed beads. So the way we're going to begin is with about 5 feet of 0.006 green wildfire beading thread, and I have again my 13 by 18 millimeter rectangle, and this is in the color shift Sphinx color. Putting 4 11/0 seed beads onto the needle. This is the Duracoat silver lined light amethyst. I'm going to go back through the first 3 out of those 4 beads in a circular fashion, which is going to bring this into a, you guessed it, circle. We're going to do a total of 20 right angle weave units. What I'm going to do here is add 3 more beads, and if you don't know right angle weave, you might want to watch a video on that first. You're going to add 3 more beads. Your thread's coming out of the top of that bead number 3. You're going to go into the bottom of that bead there from the first set of 4. I'm flipping the project in my hand so it's easier to sew. I'm going to sew through 1 bead and 2 beads from that second group of 3 that I added. Again, I'm adding 3 more beads. The thread's coming out of the top of the bead right there. I'm going to go into the bottom of that same bead. As I go into the bottom of that same bead and my thread comes out the top, I now have my next right angle weave unit or raw unit. So far I've done 3 units. You're going to sew through again the first 2 beads in that group of 3 that you added. This time I'm going to come out the bottom of my bead. I'm going to add 3 more. Again, we want to make 20 units. Coming out of the bottom of that last bead, I'm going to sew into the top of that last bead to bring it into a round loop. And then sew through in a circular fashion through the first 2 beads in that group of 3 that you put on. Now again, we're going to repeat this a total of 20 times. And the 20th time as we do it, we want to make it into a loop. So after you have 19 ready to go, you're going to get ready to add your 20th, linking basically the starting side and the side you're working on together. Once you're done with 19 of your right angle weave units, it's time to do the 20th. I'm coming out of a bead just like I would get ready to add my next unit, and I'm putting on 1 11/0 seed bead. I'm going to go back to the starting side here, and where my thread is coming out of at the top, I'm going to sew down through that same bead. What that's going to do is put this 11/0 basically at the top of one of these right angle units that I'm creating here. This is going to round out the design and bring the ends together. On the other side, after you're coming out of that bead, you want to make sure there's no turns in your right angle weave piece here, that everything's lining up, making sure that it's nice and flat. I'm going to add 1 more of my 11/0 seed bead, and I'm going to sew down through the original bead my thread was coming out of on that ending side. What that's going to do is put 1 bead on the top and bottom. You can see it kind of closes up that right angle weave unit as you're looking on it. Give a nice tight pull, and then just double check and make sure that there's no turns in your right angle weave little circle here, that you don't have it kind of twisting at all upon itself. This will close up and give you that 20th unit. And then what we're going to do is come down the sides and add in some 11/0 seed beads in an alternate color. You can stick with the same color. I'm going to be using the metallic dark bronze. That way it doesn't get confusing for which way is which. So we started out doing right angle weave, and now we're going to switch to peyote stitch. My thread is currently coming out on one of what I'm going to call my lateral kind of beads here, and I want it to come out through one of the horizontal beads. So I'm going to sew through 1 more of my purple beads right in that thread line. And then right here I'm going to create my first corner, because again I want it to have the rectangle shape. Go ahead and pick up 2 of your metallic dark bronze 11/0, And we're gonna sew through all of the beads right now on the right-hand side whose holes face up and down. I'm gonna sew through that horizontal bead on the right, add in one more 11, sew through the next horizontal bead on the right-hand side. So I'm basically just sewing right up the line. Your pattern to get the corners is going to be sewing 2 beads, then 3 individual beads catching between each of those right angle weave units. And then after 3 individuals, we're going to sew in a group of 2 to get our next corner. We're then going to sew 5 individual beads. You can see I'm just going right around the circle. And after 5 individual beads catching onto those right angle weave units and just that right hand side bead, we are going to add another grouping of 2. So basically there'll be 5 along the right side and the left side, and then at the top of the bottom, which are the slimmer sides of the actual rectangle, there'll be 3 independent beads. This is going to help to get us that cornering effect that we want. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my last bead independently for the side. And then again, catching onto that right angle weave on the right hand side. So literally just sewing right up that row. 2 beads go on and pull nice and tight. Again, now 3 individual beads go on. Bead gets added, sew through that next bead along this right hand line. Bead added, sewing through, 1 more bead, sewing through. This is my last corner, or my grouping of 2 that I need to add. 2 beads get added, and then as I go through and grab on to the last of all of that right hand side of beads, I have 5 more independent beads to add. This is what's going to give me that rectangle shape, as the groupings where the 2 are become the corners of my rectangle. As you go in and add that 5th and final in that bronze color, you're going through that first purple 11-0 on the right hand side, and you're also going to sew through those first 2 corner beads that you added, so those first 2 dark bronze. From here we're going to do a row of 15-0s, and these are in the galvanized gold color. I'm going to add 1 15-0 because we're doing peyote stitch now between each one of my bronze 11-0s. Because I'm switching from an 11 to a 15, this is automatically going to pull it in and make it smaller along the front here. When you get to the corner 2, you're going to sew through both 2 seed beads. So again, you're just adding in 1 15-0 between each one of the 11-0 bronze groupings. And when you get to that grouping of 2, you just sew through both beads as if it's 1 stitch in the peyote. When you get back around and you're adding in your last of your 15-0s, you're going to sew through the first 2 bronze beads that your thread was originally coming out of. And then you're going to step up in this peyote stitch, sewing through that first 15-0 seed bead that you just put on in this rotation around. We're going to sew around and again do 1 more row of peyote stitch. In between each one of the 15-0s, you're going to grab 1 15-0 and add it onto the stitch, which again, because we're going basically downsizing, it's going to make it smaller and kind of curved towards the middle. After each one of my 15-0s then, I sew through a 15-0 that's already there. When you get to your corner, or your grouping of 2 beads that you kind of jumped over, what I want you to do is pick up one of your silver lined light amethyst and sew into the next 15-0. This again is going to kind of pop out that corner there and just add a little bit of an extra look. If you want to keep that corner dark, you can actually add in one of the bronze instead. Going around then here, you're going to add 1 15-0 between each one of those 11-0s. And if you'll notice, I am pulling the thread rather tight, making sure that bezeling or that kind of folding in is occurring. So circle the whole way around the piece, adding in those 11-0s between, or I'm sorry, your 15-0s between your 11-0s. And then when you get to that section where there is that jump where there's 2 11-0s that sit between the 15s, like the next one here, that's where you're going to pick up one of your 11-0s in that purple color and string over to the next 15. You're going to end up basically with 4 quarters, which is going to give you 4 portions where you see that little pop of purple along the corners. The last bead to add in this final rotation around is my last 11O seed bead, and jump over to, again, that first 15O seed bead that my thread was coming out of. After doing so, I want to give a nice tight pull to make that nice rectangular setting that my color shift rectangle will sit inside as I get ready to pull the back in. Once you're done here and you have that nice pull, we're going to take our thread from the front of the design and bring it to the back of the design in order to also make that closed in. You're going to take your thread and needle, just kind of ignore or push that stop thread out of the way, and go along the piece here, making sure that you're sewing back through both the peyote stitch and that right angle weave so that you don't see any extra thread showing. Once you get to the back here, we're going to basically be repeating the front, going from the right angle weave to the peyote stitch. Coming along the back now here, we went and we connected to all the right hand side beads along that right angle weave. Now we're going to connect to all the left hand side beads as we bring in and tighten up the back. So to tighten up the back, we're going to switch to 15O seed beads right away. In the corner section, just like we did in the front, you're going to add 2 15Os instead of that 1 15O. You can look back to the start to see when that is if you want to, or kind of count out as you add the beads, adding in those 2 15Os, and then looking back from the front to the back of the piece, making sure you're on those corners. So again, now I'll do 5 15s, pulling nice and tight, bringing that right angle weave to the back, and then a group of 2 15s as I sew again, connecting all of these left hand side, which is now becoming the back of my piece. So again, we're repeating what we did along the front, just this time instead of using the bronze 15O or 11Os, we're switching right to 15Os and using them in the same fashion. Again, when we get to 5 independent, 1, 2, 3, 4, and my 5th, you can see I have my crystal in here now too. I am going to come out that corner, add in 2 15s at the corner to keep that cornering effect, and then continue on, adding 3 more independent 15s at the top, circling the whole way around the piece. Once you finish going around and adding your first layer of 15s, you're going to flip over the piece and just make sure that your rectangle looks nice and centered and in place, and you can see that nice kind of emerald cut look to it. Flip it back over, and you're going to, after adding your last 15O, go through that first purple bead that your thread was coming out of, and then the first 15O bead in the rotation. Coming out that corner bead there, I'm actually going to add 3 15Os, skip those 2 beads along the edge, and pick up those independent 15Os along the sides here. This is going to kind of create a little corner there. Go in then between those 15s and add 1 more 15 between each. Again, pulling the back just a tad tighter. If you like the look of the back, always keep in mind both the back and the front. You can do the same technique along the back and the front. When I'm teaching simple bezeling, like I did with the Rivoli, I like to show a little bit of variance from the back to the front just so you can see your options. Going through here then, as you add in 4 individual beads, give a nice tight pull as you go up the rows, and then when you get to that corner bead, and your next bead in line would be those 2 15O seed beads, what you're going to do is sew in 3 15s and skip over those 2 beads to the next. So again, I'm here at that corner, add in 3 15s, 1, 2, 3, skip over those corner 2 beads, and sew into that next grouping of 3 15Os along the top. All you have to do now is continue this stitch. Again, just kind of getting that quartering effect, adding in the extra seed beads to finish off the back of the bezel. As you place in your final bead here, you're going to then bring your thread and needle to the top of the rectangle so you can add in your bezel. So you'll see the nice kind of bezel set rectangle there, and we're going to add our nice bezel or our nice wire guard along the top. So you can make these into earrings, you can make them into pendants, you can link them together. And when I'm coming out of the last 15-0, what I'm gonna do is jump into the right angle weave. So I'm gonna sew up through that corner bead there. So right around that right angle weave, so going around the circle, around through those purple beads here, and getting myself in position to add in my wire guard. Where I'm going to add my wire guard is at the top of the piece here. You'll see your 3 beads sitting that line up kind of the whole straight along with the piece. I'm coming out of the bead on the right hand side. I'm going to add my wire guard, and before adding the wire guard, what I'm going to do for this piece is stretch my wire guard. So I want it to sit a little bit more wide apart, like that, rather than close together. Add in your wire guard, going up one side, down the other side, and once you're down the other side too, you're going to go into bead number 3 in that line. So remember, I had those 3 that kind of line up right along the middle there, and I'm going into bead number 3, going from the back towards the front. That way the bail's going to sit right in the middle. Coming out the front there, I'm going to pick back up that same wire guard as my bail, going back through, kind of pulling it to center, adding, going to the front here, back down the side of the wire guard. And then as I come back to the bead on the right hand side, I want to make sure to go from the front to the back of that purple 11-0 seed bead. Again, just in an effort so that way it sits correctly in the top middle of the piece. If you want to, on the example, I also added some 15-0s just for an added little bezel set look along the edges. All I'm going to do now is sew my thread back towards this stop thread or starter thread and tie off the 2 ends. Once I tie off the 2 ends, I'm going to burn them down and finish up my rectangular piece. But you can see here I did 2 matching ones. You can put them on ear wires, you can do them as a pendant, or even link them together as a beautiful bracelet. Thanks so much for joining me in making and learning how to work with these rectangle crystals. We have so many options to choose from, and you can check them out at PotomacBeads.com. We have helpful links right in the description box below me if you do need to purchase from us online. Remember also, you can hit that little bell below me if you're not already subscribed, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can also give a thumbs up, share the video, as well as comment below and say what you are going to make and what color combination you'd like to do with these fun rectangles. As always, thanks so much for watching, and happy beading, everyone.